Like and subscribe right now, or else this will be in your bed tonight. r/AskReddit by Planet Reddit. Cops of Reddit. What simple noise complaint call blew way out of proportion? Super late to this, so I'll make it short. Ex-cop. NSW Australia. Got sent to a street out the back of our sleepy little town. Sonian was using a chainsaw at 2 AM. Not unusual because the properties are really big, but this was being done next to another house, in a garage. Turned out to be a lady chasing her husband around the room trying to jab him in the dong with the chainsaw. Of course this was in country NSW. The only other place it might happen is NT. Edit. For some reasons my phone thought I meant please instead of place. Comma. Edit. Trying to fix Lenny as per below. Animal control officer here. I handle noise complaints when they involve animals. So usually it's about excessive barking. But not this time. I received a noise complaint about someone's cats. So I called the RP, reporting party, to get more info. I assumed they were obnoxiously loud Siamese cats or something. But no. This guy was complaining that his neighbor's cats played too loud at night. What? I went out to the property to see what was up, and it turns out these people don't even share a wall. It's neighboring mobile homes in a mobile home park. The RP was absolutely outraged because those damn cats keep him up all night when they bat their little toys with bells in them all over the place. He insisted I write their crazy cat lady owner a citation on the spot. Thankfully, I was able to use the municipal code to my advantage here and point out that before I could issue a citation I would need to receive a second complaint. In writing. From another neighbor who was also bothered by the noise. No surprise. He couldn't convince anyone else to complain. And the cat lady and her rambunctious kitties lived happily ever after, cause that crazy RP moved away a few months later. Got a call for a noise complaint at a frequent flyer's house, so we cruised out figuring the guy was drunk and we'd pick him up on a parole violation. We got to his house and he had literally blown off half of his garage and half of his arm trying to make dabs. Turns out the guy thought he just had to burn a bunch of weed and it would melt down into oil, so he gathered up a dozen propane tanks and somehow managed to turn his garage into a bomb. The best part was he swore up and down, while he's screaming in pain, that we only came out to steal his shit. Hi, yes, I'd like to make a noise complaint about my neighbor. Yes. It sounds like he blew up half of his garage. Bash org link. I'll throw in my story here. Why not? Worked in Harlem 8 years, have since moved over to Jamaica, Queens. But I was driving my SGT that night and we were at the corner of 145 and 8th Ave. There's a Popeyes in that corner, but above it is 5 stories of apartments. We're stopped at the light heading westbound and all of a sudden we start hearing a loud screaming coming from one of the windows above Popeyes. It was the summer and our windows were open, so my sergeant looks up and says, "Holy shit," so I immediately lean down and look out the windshield and see a white lady in her 40s hanging out the window screaming at the top of her lungs. She's covered in blood, her hair is a mess and she's screaming for help. I quickly pull the car over and ask for an additional while we go up the stairs to the apartment. When we exit out of the stairwell there's smeared blood all over the walls leading into the apartment, which has its door cracked open. We head in slowly, guns drawn. And we see a man step out from the bathroom who doesn't have a single scratch on him. We scream at him to get on the ground and quickly cuff him up while the screaming continues in the back room. As we get him up off the floor our additional shows up and we quickly pass him off to them and head to the back of the apartment. Guns still drawn towards the screams. As we round the corner into the living room we see a woman in a torn undershirt covered in blood and scratches, and she has a cat on her back and she's whipping her body around trying to get it off her. I asked her what is going on and if her boyfriend did this to her, and she screams at us, "No, this duckling cat is trying to kill me." Needless to say, we quickly get the guy out of cuffs and have to call Isu to come catch this psychotic cat. That's one that will stay with me till retirement. Was this guy just taking a calm shit while his girlfriend screams near bloody murder? I think he tried to help and was washing her blood off his hands. Either way, when he stepped out he looked shady as hell. I usually don't work on a night shift, but when I had to, of course I'm the one dealing with some creepy shit. Some old lady reported that weird noises can be heard from her neighbor's house and she sounded desperate, so we went there with my colleague. We showed up and it was completely silent on the street. The old lady met us on the street in her dressing gown and she told us that she heard screamings coming from her next door neighbor's house. It was weird because she didn't mention any screamings in the call. In other way, we would be there much faster. So we're knocking. No one answers. My colleague consulted the case with our supervisor and he allowed us to go in. He also sent the reinforcements. Okay. So we force the doors and go in. It's dark and quiet. We were searching the house only with our flashlights and we found nothing. We go to the floor and searching room by room. No one. The house is empty. My colleague is calling supervisor again. And suddenly I hear him screaming like a little girl. He jumped back to me with true ducking fear in his eyes. His hand went for the gun and then I saw it too. The old lady was in the home and she started charging at us with evil grin and making some scary hissing noises. My colleague was ready to shoot her. But fortunately the fear paralyzed him. The old lady got at us, screaming and beating us. But she was so weak that we barely felt anything, lol. The owners of the house weren't really pleased after they heard what happened. Lol. Holy shit dude, lol. I probably would have screamed too. Well, that was terrifying. While you were calling in noise complaints, he was studying the blade against people with tasers and guns. 10/10 idea there. Not a cop. But one night in college I was sitting on my apt balcony studying and the old lady next door is yelling and screaming at me to turn the noise down. I didn't do anything cause I'm just studying. No music. No laptop. Just my books and notes. She called the cops. He talks to me. I give my statement about how she harasses anyone and everyone who is walking past her yard, whispering or just sitting outside. Police goes to get her statement and she slapped him across the face. I didn't hear the conversation but she did get arrested. So a simple noise complaint turned into the lady being arrested for assault. That's not just assault. It's assault on an officer, which I think is a felony. First off, this is why we wolfpack every call even though our supervisors don't want us wasting time responding to seemingly simple noise complaints and 911 hang-ups. We had a noise complaint coming from a small community saying there was a party out in one of the arroyos down this long private drive. Like 3 or 4 calls saying there was a huge bonfire and music. 3 of us are on shift and start cruising out there. It's like 10 miles away. So we're driving fast but not running code. About 4 miles out we hear the ambulance get dispatched for a shots fired call in the same area and they are told to stage for law enforcement. We always get the med calls a few minutes after central so we keep cruising. The call from our dispatch catches up a couple minutes later telling us to expedite as the shots are coming from the same area we're headed to. We run code, get there, and see about 15 cars coming down the private drive. People start jumping out of passenger seats and back seats and running into the night. We squeeze by the line of cars. We pull up to the bonfire and get down with our rifles. First off, this is why we wolfpack every call even though our supervisors don't want us wasting time responding to seemingly simple noise complaints and 911 hang-ups. Ah, that makes sense. I heard someone say help as I walked past an open window in my complex today and made a non-emergency call as even though I didn't hear anything. I figured it was better to be safe than sorry. I thought it would have been a single officer just coming by to check but a bunch showed up. Was just a kid playing around though. Edit. I'm sorry. Do most people just ignore it when someone from inside a house yells help? Guess I made a mistake and cared about someone other than myself. You did great. I have a very close friend who eventually came to live with my family as a teen. Turned out her and the siblings screamed for help all the damn time for a while. The abuser thought it was hilarious and would point out no one was coming to save them. Apparently the neighborhood was a mix of we thought the kids were playing and it wasn't our place. Many people choose to not be a bother to dispatches over potentially helping someone. Bravo to you. Not a police officer but a former dispatcher. We got a call one night of loud music. Normally officers don't go on these types of calls, especially on a busy weekend night, but this caller called a crap ton of times and was a pain, and the beat officer was bored, so he went to the apartment complex. He disregarded his backup and responded alone. About 5-10 minutes later he called for a backup, so I started one. Nothing unusual. I figured it was just a big party or something and he needed assistance breaking it up. About 30-45 minutes later he called for a supervisor. This was very unusual as supervisors never respond on noise complaints, and they hadn't arrested anyone or given any indications that they'd had to fight anyone or anything else where a supervisor would respond. Turns out that there was a 13-14 years old girl who was there alone because her parents were away for the weekend. She had been chatting with a 30-something guy from a town 2-3 hours away. Since her parents were gone, he came down to keep her company. When the cop got there he discovered that she was there with him and saw used condoms all over the place apparently. Guy went to jail. Girl went to the children's home. That went from 0-1000 very quick. You mean 0 to pedophilia very quick. Okay. I'm also not a cop. And my story happened when I was maybe 5-6 years old, so details are hazy for me. This would have been in the 90s in Grand Rapids, Michigan. In case anyone might recognize the story. One night a guy comes to our door and starts banging on it unrelentingly. My dad sees this big, shirtless guy who looks like he's running for his life. My dad, being another big shirtless guy, decides to have me and my siblings go to our rooms. And he lets him in. As he was soaking wet and it was cold out, he sat on the couch, and I remember my dad wrapping him in a blanket, and all he could say, over and over, was thank you. Thank you. I saw toys in your yard and I knew you would help me. My dad assumes the guy is delirious, possibly drunk, and calls the cops when he starts to really freak out. He didn't want the neighbors calling because they assumed a fight was happening in our home. We had an old, super nosy neighbor who loved making noise complaints against my dad. Next thing my sister and I know, we're looking out our bedroom window at a veritable sea of squad cars all the way down the street. Turns out the guy was running for his life. And the guy he was running from had already killed a friend of his. And had the body in the trunk of his car. Edit. Finally found an article on it. This was definitely it. That's really good of your dad. Holy shit. Good for your dad. Can't imagine what it must have felt like for that guy, though. Story from my dad's cop days. He and his partner respond to a call for a noise complaint and possible DV. It was at an apartment complex with a fenced-in courtyard. When they arrive, the husband is in the courtyard with a handgun popping off shots into the air. My dad calls in his sergeant. When he gets there, he tells my dad to walk around the complex to the other fenced-in side. As my dad starts to head that way, his sergeant pulls a shotgun out of his cruiser. So my dad is finally in position. He is looking through the fence and hears his sergeant telling the guy to put the gun down. Dad looked away for a second and the guy must have pointed the gun at them because all he heard was the shotgun go off. When he looked back through the fence, the guy had his left hand up in the air and his right was just dangling by a piece of muscle. Dad's sergeant blew the guy's arm off. Now fast forward 15+ years, dad is taking me shopping for football cleats. Hey son. See that guy over there? The guy with one arm? Yay. That's the guy my sergeant shot. He was buying soccer cleats for his little boy. DV? Domestic violence would be my guess. Not a cop. But when I was a senior in high school, we had a party at this dude's duplex. Yeah. It was classy. None of us were 21. But we were all drunk. Someone called the cops about the noise and traffic on the street. Cop shows up. Was cool. Just told us to take it inside. One of the girls asked the cop to check on the tenant next door because they heard the lady arguing with some guy. About the time, the guy staggers out of the duplex with a big ass knife sticking out of his chest and the lady behind him with another big ass knife in her hand. The cop draws on the lady and tells her to put the knife down. Which he did. Right between dude's shoulder blades. As drunk as I was, I thought I was seeing things. But nope. It happened. Holy shit. How did that turn out? Did the guy live? Pretty good chance. It's super user how many knife wounds a human can take. The thing that used to kill was infection. Edit. Surprising. Not a police officer, but I used to have a mentally unstable neighbor. One night she was screaming at our house from her balcony about the noise we were making and how she had called the cops. We didn't have the TV or stereo on. I was alone mashing potatoes in a stainless steel pot, and the clink 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 of the metal masher on the pot somehow carried across the yard and aggravated her so much she needed to call the police. The police show up, knock and ask about the noise complaint. I explained that I was mashing potatoes and demonstrate the noise. They told me that they regularly respond to noise complaints from her, and only 2 days before she had complained because her back neighbor was hammering in a picture hook at 2 in the afternoon. They tell me to just ignore her and bid me farewell. I find it ironic that so many people respond to loud noise by screaming at you. Well, you wouldn't hear them over the loud noise if they just talked normally. I police dispatch. We have these 3 crap motels, all within a 1-2 mile from one another. I coined them the Bermuda Triangle for and the batshit insane stuff that happens at them. At the worst of them, we refer to the 3rd floor as the hookers and dope floor. We respond there one night for report of a woman yelling. Nothing new really, but we'll check it out given the place's history. Take the stairs to the 3rd floor. Walk a portion of floor and see blood smeared along the carpet. It's a trail. It's a wide trail of blood saturating the carpet. Which way to follow it? Eventually get to the elevator to find blood-soaked handprints on the doors. Ding. Hit the button. Doors open to find a woman, her hand reaching forward. Skin pale white. Moaning. Her other hand was across her midsection. Backup assists her. Backup followed the rest of the trail back to her room. No one else there. The white linens of the bed were completely drenched in thick, dark blood. Investigators said they had never seen so much blood at one scene. Blood was on the ceiling. Turns out this woman tried killing herself by slicing open her abdomen and cutting her wrists. She then decided that life was worth living and dragged herself through the hall to the elevator, yelling for help. No one helped. Just pretended they didn't hear it. Except the one person to dial 911. By that point she lost so much blood. When troopers found her, she was losing consciousness. She actually ended up surviving. Not a cop, but have some weird experiences calling police when I was in rough my dorm in college. Got a noise complaint call on my duty phone at 3 to 4 am. Someone said they heard their neighbor, female, sobbing uncontrollably for a really long time. Knock on the door over and over again and no answer, but I can tell someone is inside. I call the cops and have them knock and force them to open the door. They are allowed to force you to open without a warrant if there is suspicion someone is in danger. Door is open and standing there is 2 Chinese girls, foreign exchange students. One looking creepy as shit and the other wearing nothing but a towel and crying in the corner. After quite a bit of questioning, it turns out they were dating and living together in the dorm. The creepy girl was trying to sexually assault the other one. Had to figure this all out through a very broken English and from a really terrified girl. Creepy girl goes to the station and the victim girl got taken to a safe house dorm. Turned out way different than I expected. But I'm really glad I didn't give up when she wouldn't open the door eventually. 2. Call about a medical emergency at 4 am. The call made it seem like some girl was having appendicitis or something. But turns out she was 7 months pregnant and having false labor pains. She was living in a dorm by herself at 7 months pregnant with no access to a car. And wouldn't tell anyone she was pregnant. Just a disaster waiting to happen. Had to figure out how to help her / get her to a hospital without an ambulance. She didn't want to have to pay for one at 4 in the morning. That was not in my training. Oh god. I was in RA 2 and it was crazy. I had cops to deal with for alcohol poisoning and 8 rapes. But I just let the sisters' bathroom threesome go. 2 sisters. 1 dude. Communal shower at 2 am. The worst was getting police involved when a girl's stepdad was stalking her. Both physically and through spyware and keystrokers on her computer. Stalking her since they'd been having a sexual relationship since she was a tween. 11 or 12 I think. And he'd been her dad since she was a baby. And her mom was pretending she had just found out. Buffy. Horrible situation. It wasn't the only reason. But I transferred schools after that. I kind of wonder what happened to all of those people. But a lifetime in jail for both parents wouldn't be enough. Not a cop. But was at a party that my friend had that the cops were called. The guy who owned the house was blacked out. And one of those guys who likes to show off by being badass. Well, cop comes. Super nice guy. Joking around with us. Asking us to just have fun at a reasonable noise level. Owner of the house says, "Duck the police. I'll handle this myself." Turns the music as loud as it can be and sparks a joint. Cop still being in the garage. Cop told all of us that didn't live there, all being respectful to him, to just get home safe. Next day, owner of the house is calling everyone there asking why he has over $1,000 worth of fines pinned to his refrigerator. Very similar story. Small party at a friend's house. Cops show up to tell us to quiet down some. The cops were super cool and were just about to leave. The owner of the house comes flying out the front door drunk AF and attempts to dropkick one of the cops. He ended up in jail. And the cops stuck around until cabs could be there to take the rest of us home. This was before Uber. The owner of the house comes flying out the front door drunk AF and attempts to dropkick one of the cops. That is so ducking stupid, I'm tempted to not believe you. Then again, thanks to the interwebs, I've seen tons of dumb shit like that. Not a loud noise complaint, but a possible suicide attempt. There was reports of a girl out on a ledge in a high-rise building. So we go try to figure out which apartment it is. They let us in. It's a couple of girls and a guy. It turns out, no suicide attempt. Just some dumbasses sitting on a really high ledge like it ain't no thing. Smoking cigarettes. But as we were trying to figure out what was going on, we saw drug paraphernalia in plain view. Which is probable cause enough to search. But just to be extra safe, we got permission from the girl whose apartment it was to search. We found a buttload of drugs and more paraphernalia. But also in plain view was a laptop open with a fake ID right there where you could see. Turns out the guy was on probation, or parole, for fraud and ID theft. The search also yielded a large plastic tub container of other people's identifying information. Bake game away toys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.